People often say love is blind, but in truth, love sometimes sees everything: the scars, the wounds, the pain, and still chooses to stay. This story begins with a man whose silence was heavier than words and a woman whose heart was braver than her fears. From the very first moment, destiny placed them in each other's path. It was not joy or laughter that drew her to him, but his pain. She married him knowing the depth of his sorrow, but what she found in return was something she never expected. Stay with me till the end, because this is not just a love story, it's a reminder that broken hearts can still beat stronger together, and sometimes, joy comes from the most unlikely places. His name was Aram. He was 32 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that looked like they carried the weight of the world. People who passed him on the street often thought he was reserved, perhaps just quiet, but those who knew him whispered about the tragedy that had shaped him. Aram had once been full of life, ambitious and hopeful, engaged to a woman he loved more than his own soul. But fate had played a cruel trick on the eve of his wedding. A terrible accident had taken her away. She was gone in an instant, leaving Aram alive but hollow. Years passed, yet he carried that grief like a shadow that never left. His parents, broken themselves, urged him to remarry, to move on, but he would always shake his head. "My heart is not mine anymore," he would say, his voice cold and final. But life has its own ways of writing chapters. In another city lived a woman named Aisha, 26 years old, soft-spoken but strong. She was the kind of person who always found beauty in the smallest things: flowers blooming in cracks of stone, children's laughter echoing in streets, sunsets painting the sky. Yet behind her gentle smile was her own history of battles. Aisha had grown up watching her parents struggle with poverty, watching her father fall sick and her mother labor endlessly just to keep the home alive. She had learned early that happiness wasn't something given, it was something you fought to create. Her faith and patience shaped her, making her resilient. She believed in healing others, even when she was tired herself. Their worlds collided not through romance, but through family ties. Aisha's aunt was Aram's neighbor. When Aisha came to stay for a short visit, she would often see Aram leaving for work, his head lowered, his face solemn. He never greeted, never smiled. Yet something about him tugged at her heart. Perhaps it was the way his silence screamed louder than words, or the way his eyes looked like they were waiting for someone to notice the storm inside. It was during a family gathering when they first truly met. The elders spoke lightly about the idea of marriage, whispering how Aisha would be a good match for Aram. When Aisha overheard it, her heart skipped a beat. She knew his story. She had heard the whispers of his broken engagement, the tragedy of his past. She should have felt fear. After all, who would willingly step into the life of a man still chained to grief? But instead, she felt compassion. She thought of his loneliness, his silence, his pain. A small voice inside her whispered, "Maybe you could bring light where darkness lies." When her mother asked her about the proposal, Aisha didn't hesitate. "If it's written for me, I'll accept. I don't expect him to love me immediately. I just want to be someone who stands beside him." Her words surprised even herself, for she knew marriage wasn't a small step. Yet something about Aram's brokenness felt like a calling to her soul. Aram, on the other hand, was reluctant. He told his parents bluntly, "Don't tie her life to my emptiness. I am not capable of giving love." But when they pressed further, when they begged him to at least meet her properly, he agreed out of respect. Their first proper conversation was brief. Aram's words were short, formal, almost detached, while Aisha's were warm, gentle, carrying patience. She didn't question his past, didn't try to cheer him forcibly. She just spoke as if he was a normal man, not a broken one. That touched him in a way he didn't expect. Weeks later, against his own belief, Aram agreed to the marriage, not because he was ready, but because something about Aisha's quiet strength unsettled the walls he had built. The wedding was simple, without grandeur. Friends and relatives whispered. Some said Aisha was too young to sacrifice her future like this. Others pitied her for marrying a man who still lived in yesterday. But Aisha carried herself with grace, smiling softly as she signed the papers that bound her fate to his. Their married life in the beginning was not filled with romance. The house was quiet, often echoing with unspoken words. Aram would leave early for work, return late, and spend hours sitting silently in the living room, staring at photographs from his past. Aisha never complained. She cooked, she managed the home, and she would sometimes sit nearby with a book, letting silence be their companion. She never forced him to open up, never demanded affection. She simply existed beside him, like a calm presence reminding him that he was not alone anymore. But nights were the hardest. Aram often woke from nightmares, his breath heavy, his face wet with tears. Aisha would wake too, her heart aching at the sight of his pain. She wanted to reach out, to hold him, but she feared crossing his boundaries. So, she prayed quietly, whispering words of comfort when he couldn't hear. She believed that love wasn't always about grand gestures. Sometimes it was about patience and silent prayers. Slowly, very slowly, things began to change. One evening, when Aram returned from work, he found Aisha humming softly in the kitchen, her face glowing in the golden light. For the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was the faint memory of warmth. Another day, when he saw her helping a neighbor's child with homework, laughing softly at the little boy's mistakes, he found himself watching her longer than he intended. These small moments planted seeds of change in his heart, though he tried to deny them. Still, his pain wasn't easy to erase. He often found himself torn between guilt and hope. How could he allow himself to smile with Aisha when a part of him still mourned another? How could he open his heart without feeling he was betraying the woman he had lost? These thoughts kept him distant, but Aisha never demanded answers. She gave him space, but also consistency. Her kindness never faltered, her patience never weakened. And then came a turning point. One rainy evening, the city lost power, and their home was wrapped in darkness. Aisha lit candles around the living room, their flames dancing softly. She sat down with Aram, offering him a cup of tea. For the first time, he looked at her not with detachment, but with vulnerability. "Why did you agree to marry me?" he asked suddenly, his voice low, almost breaking. Her heart pounded, but she answered calmly, "Because I saw your pain, and I believed that maybe I could help carry it with you. I didn't come here expecting joy for myself. I came hoping you wouldn't have to face your nights alone anymore." His eyes filled with tears he couldn't hide. No one had ever said such words to him before. For years, people told him to move on, to forget, to find happiness again. But here was a woman who wasn't asking him to erase his past, but to share it. That night, for the first time, he spoke of his fiancée Tilda copyrightee, of the dreams they once held, of the day everything shattered. Aisha listened without interruption, her eyes glistening, her hands folded in prayer like patience. When he finished, exhausted and broken, she whispered, "Thank you for trusting me with your truth." That was the first crack in his walls. From then on, he began to speak more, not much, not often, but enough for Aisha to see hope. Their conversations were still simple, but they carried weight. She learned what made him smile faintly, what memories still haunted him, what silence really meant. And he learned that behind her gentle smile was a woman stronger than steel, someone who chose him not out of pity but out of courage. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The house that once echoed with emptiness now carried faint signs of life via a laugh here, a shared meal there, small smiles exchanged without words. Aram still carried his grief, but it no longer suffocated him completely. And Aisha, though she hadn't yet found the joy she had dreamed of, found peace in knowing that her presence mattered. Little did they know, this was only the beginning. The journey ahead would test them in ways they couldn't imagine, and the unexpected joy Aisha longed for was waiting just around the corner, hidden, patient, ready to bloom. So if you're still with me, don't go anywhere, because in the next chapter, you'll see how love, patience, and faith transform pain into something beautiful. And before we turn the page, don't forget if this story touched your heart, hit the like button, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story that reminds us, no matter how broken life feels, there is always hope waiting to be found. And when we left off, Anna had just brought Grace into the world, and though the night was cold and the snow fell heavy, the warmth of that tiny heartbeat promised a new beginning. But beginnings, as beautiful as they are, come with battles. And this is where the story deepens, where choices must be made, where wounds of the past threaten to rise, and where love is not the kind wrapped in romance, but the fierce, sacrificial kind that stands through storms. It becomes the thread holding everything together. If you're still here with me, I ask you to listen closely, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a reflection of how even the broken can rise again. And if these stories matter to you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe so we can keep sharing them together. Life after Grace's birth was a mixture of exhaustion and wonder. Anna's nights were endless, her body aching as she rocked her newborn back and forth, whispering lullabies through tears she couldn't always explain. Sometimes they were tears of joy, sometimes of fear, but mostly they were tears of gratitude. She looked at Grace's tiny fingers curled around her own and thought, "They tried to end me, but here she is, a proof that I am still here." Daniel helped where he could, even though he still worked long hours to provide for Lily. Some nights he came home bone-tired, shoulders heavy, but still he took Grace in his arms so Anna could rest, pacing the living room with the baby pressed against his chest. Lily, too, had stepped into her role as the older sister. Though she was only 7, she would sit by Anna, humming songs she made up, and Anna marveled at how natural the child's kindness was. For the first time in a long time, Anna felt like she belonged, not as a guest, not as a mistake, but as part of something real. But happiness attracts whispers. In town, rumors spread faster than wildfire. "She's living off him," some said. "That child will only drag him down," others murmured. Anna heard it every time she stepped out for groceries or walked Grace down the street. Their eyes judged, their lips sneered, and though she tried to hold her head high, inside she felt the same crushing shame she thought she had left behind. One afternoon, when she returned from the market, Daniel found her on the porch, sitting with her face buried in her hands. "Anna," he said softly, crouching in front of her. "What happened?" She shook her head, unable to meet his eyes, but finally whispered, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm just a burden you don't need." Daniel's jaw tightened, and for a moment, he didn't speak. Then, with the firmness that came from a place deep in his chest, he said, "Don't you ever say that again. You and Grace are not the burden. You're family now, and I don't care what they say out there. What matters is what we choose to be in here." His hand tapped his chest over his heart. "And in here, you belong." Tears filled Anna's eyes, because no one had ever claimed her like that before. Not with words, not with truth, not with love that expected nothing in return. But battles weren't only fought with gossip, they came in more brutal forms. Grace's biological father, a man who had once charmed Anna but later abandoned her when she needed him most, reappeared. He had heard she was living with Daniel, that she had given birth, and suddenly, he wanted rights. Not because he cared, but because his pride had been wounded by the whispers around town. He showed up one evening, banging on Daniel's door, demanding to see his daughter. Anna froze when she saw him. The memories rushed back like a wave crashing over her, the manipulation, the betrayal, the nights of loneliness. She held Grace tighter, her body trembling. Daniel stepped between them, his broad frame blocking the doorway. "You need to leave," Daniel said calmly but firmly. The man sneered, "She's my kid. You think you can just play hero and take what's mine?" Daniel's fists clenched, but his voice remained steady. "You had your chance. You walked away. This child doesn't need a man who abandons her. She needs people who will stay." The tension in the air was thick, and for a moment, Anna feared violence, but the man eventually spat at the ground and stormed off, promising it wasn't over. That night, Anna cried into Daniel's shoulder, terrified of what might come. But Daniel whispered, "He won't win. Not while I'm here." Weeks turned into months. And despite the challenges, life inside their little home grew richer. There were simple joys of family dinners where Lily insisted on saying grace, laughter that echoed in the kitchen when Grace giggled for the first time, and quiet moments when Anna read bedtime stories with Lily curled at her side. Slowly, Anna began to write again. She filled notebooks with words she thought she had lost, words about pain and healing, words about darkness and light. Daniel noticed her late at night, sitting at the table with her pen moving furiously, tears streaking her cheeks, and though he didn't read them, he knew she was reclaiming the voice that had once been stolen from her. One day, he told her, The world will hear your story." She shook her head, doubting herself, but his faith in her planted a seed. But storms weren't done testing them. One night, as the wind howled outside, Danielle received the letter Grace's biological father had filed for custody. Anna felt the world collapse under her feet. How could she fight him? She had no money, no standing, nothing but the love she held for her daughter. Panic set in, and she told Danielle she should leave, that she didn't want to ruin his life with court battles and rumors. But Danielle stopped her, his voice breaking as he said, "Anna, don't you understand? You're not alone anymore. We'll fight this together. You, me, Lilia, we're a family. Families don't run, families stand." The weeks that followed were filled with courtrooms and cold stares. Anna trembled as lawyers questioned her past, painting her as reckless, unfit, a mistake. But every time she faltered, she saw Daniel in the front row, his eyes steady, reminding her she was stronger than she believed. Lily would draw pictures of their family of four figures holding hands and leave them in Anna's lap with the words, "We love you." Those simple drawings gave her the courage to keep standing. In the end, the judge ruled in Anna's favor. Grace would stay with her, safe and loved. The man who had tried to take her walked out of the courtroom defeated, his pride shattered. Anna collapsed into Daniel's arms, sobbing with relief, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe in a future. Not just survival, not just existing, but truly living. From that day forward, everything shifted. Daniel, who had once been only a single dad trying to piece his life together, now found himself part of something bigger, a new chapter, not written in isolation, but shared with Anna and Grace. Anna, who once believed her story had ended before it began, discovered that endings can be rewritten. Together, with Lily's laughter filling the house and Grace's cries turning into coos, they built a life not defined by the past but by the love they chose daily. And friends, that is where Chapter 2 closes, not with a fairy tale ending, but with the truth that sometimes the most broken stories can become the most beautiful when someone refuses to give up. If this journey touched you, if Anna's courage and Daniel's strength reminded you of the power of second chances, please like this video and subscribe to the channel, because every time you do, you help us share more stories like these, stories that matter, stories that heal, stories that remind us that even when they try to end her story, a new chapter can always begin.